All right, let's get started. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all excited. Welcome to Blue Sky. So I'll just say a few words before we get started. Um, the way we market to consumers is changing as we speak, and the to keep up with this constantly changing scenario, digital marketing experts need to be in step with this evolving tech trends. And a lot of you here work with consumers to understand what makes them engage with our brands. We have with us today a world-renowned expert on digital marketing who can tell us all about this and more, Simon Kemp. A little about Simon. Yes. A little about Simon. Simon is a globally recognized thought leader in digital marketing. CMO Asia magazine identified him as one of Asia's most influential digital marketers, and he appears regularly on television and the media to discuss technology's impact on business, culture, and society. Simon Kemp has been developing marketing strategies and frameworks for many of the world's best brands like Unilever, Coca-Cola, Google, Nestle, and Diego. He also runs the Singapore Whiskey Society, and I shall leave it to Simon to tell you all about that one. A little about his company, Kepios. Kepios is a global strategy consultancy that helps organizations and individuals all over the world to make sense of how technology is shaping the future. They specialize in digital marketing, including web, mobile, social media, e-commerce, and strategic planning. KPS also produces the renowned global digital reports on behalf of Via Social and Hootsuite. I think a lot of you would know about that, which have been becoming some of the world's most widely read references for insights into digital, social, mobile marketing trends around the world. Without further ado, I invite Simon to take the stage. Please welcome Simon Kemp.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us as well. I appreciate you taking time out of your afternoons to join us. I appreciate it's 4 o'clock, so I hope you've had a little bit of sugar and a little bit of caffeine to keep you going. I do have a lot of stuff to get through over the next 45 to 50 minutes of presentation time. We will have time for questions at the end as well, so have those ready. The folks that are sitting at the back, I promised, I'm going to come and ask you questions. You don't get to hide at the back. There are a couple of seats left if you don't want to ask questions right down the front. Very good. So I think the introduction, if you're on social media, you'll find me as Eskimon on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and similar. So please, if you do want to ask questions and you're the shy type, you'll find me there. Please feel free to do that. I run a company called Kepios. The easiest way of describing Kepios is it's an advisory. So we're here to help a little bit in the same way that a doctor helps you understand if you're not feeling as good as you would like. We do the same thing with businesses. We help you to understand what some of your challenges and opportunities are, and then we guide you towards the best practice. But what we don't do is develop any kind of implementation. So I'm not here to sell you anything today. It's the very good news. I'm just here to share some of the insights that we've been collecting and developing with a lot of our clients around the world. Lots of different industries, lots of different brands, lots of different countries. So this is just a selection of the brands that I've worked with over the last decade to develop a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking to you about this afternoon. Good news is the stuff that I'm going to share with you is applicable to pretty much any context that you want to think about. I'm going to pick one particular category to talk through, which is the PC category, mainly because the lovely folks at Intel are the ones that have helped to bring me here today. So little plug for them. But nonetheless, the content that I'll be sharing with you today applies to pretty much anything that you can think of. I once said that at a workshop, and a lady in the audience challenged me and said, would it help with my dating? We then actually applied the framework to dating, and she got a date as a result. So I'm now confident that this will apply to anything. But like I said, I'm not here to sell you anything, which is the good news. What we're going to do is run through, like I said, quite a lot of stuff over the next 45 minutes or so. I'm going to start with an overview of the latest state of digital, a whole bunch of stats. I'm an incredible nerd, so apologies. I have to indulge at the beginning. I'm going to show you a lot of information about the use of social media, internet, mobile, e-commerce around the world, but specifically also about India. Come on, round, there's seats down the front. But the good news is we'll go straight into that. So let's have a look at some of those numbers. These are taken from a series of reports that I produce on behalf of We Are Social and Hootsuite. We're just going into digital in 2019. So late January, we'll have all the latest updates to these numbers, 7,500 to 8,000 charts for every country in the world. So if you're a data nerd like me, I'll give you a little gift just before I finish this afternoon. But I think I want to just give you some context before I go into the marketing frameworks. That's what this data is all about. And we've already arrived at the stage where more than half of the world's population today uses the internet in some form. It's incredible how quickly that's happened. If you think about it, the World Wide Web is only 30 years old next year, and yet we've already reached the situation where we have integrated these amazing technologies into day-to-day life all around the world. So these are the latest numbers, don't worry. These are not going to be in the test at the end of the semester, so you don't need to remember them. If you're the sort of person that likes these things, I'll give you a link for all the downloads later. But 2/3 of the world's population, and this includes newborn babies and people over the age of 100, 2/3 of us now have a mobile phone. Most of us are using it every 5 seconds. I'm seeing even folks now on their phones. Hey. The internet, not quite as widespread, but very quickly growing because of these numbers on mobile. And again, social media accelerating quite quickly, but not quite at the halfway mark yet. So lots of really big numbers in there. But there's a slight challenge to those numbers, which is that things are not quite evenly distributed around the world. So some places, like especially Northern Europe, pretty much everybody is using the internet. But when you look at other parts of the world, sorry folks at the back, hope you can see that on your screens without testing your eyes at the front, but places like Middle Africa, only 1 in 8 people today using the internet. And even in our corner of the world here, so across countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, only 1 in 3 using the internet today, which, you know, it's a little bit of a saddening fact, but at the same time, there's lots of opportunity in there as well. This is where I cover 50-odd countries in these reports in depth, and unfortunately, India's still sitting at the very far right-hand side of that chart. So a long way to go, but you guys know this already. This is something that you look at pretty much every day of your lives, I'm guessing, at Flipkart. This is the latest stats I have for India. So you were the first people to see these. These are only collected last week. It's very exciting. Like I said, I'm a massive nerd. You've got quite a big population. You may have noticed that. Most of you now have some form of mobile device. A lot of those are still old school feature phones, but nonetheless a phone. So technology are very much part of everyday life. This number's already gone up. For the eagle-eyed of you, you remember the previous chart, this was only 34. It's now 35. We've gone up 1% this year. Great news. Social media, 1/4 of the population using it, which is not amazing, but it's still a good start. But this is one thing that really scared me, and I'm guessing that you guys have got even richer insights into this, but the fact that 40% of people in rural India are still unaware of the internet and how to use it, that kind of scares me, because there's a lot more to the internet than just playing Candy Crush, uploading photos of your lunch. You know, there is a massive education and sort of job opportunity connected to the internet as well. So we're looking at empowerment as much as anything else when we talk about the internet. And that's why when I look at the lower numbers, I feel a little bit of disappointment from an Indian perspective. But at the same time, I know that things are looking rosier because very latest survey from the Telecoms Regulatory Authority. I find it really difficult to say that. Telecoms Regulatory Authority of India. So they publish a monthly study of internet use in India. The most recent one from September, 10 million new internet users in India in 1 month alone. My guess is that is probably better reporting of existing numbers rather than an actual growth of 10 million. But nonetheless, that's a very, very encouraging trend. If we see that repeated in October and November, 2019 is looking like a very promising year from a digital perspective. When it comes to use, I'm guessing you know this as well, but almost everything in terms of use of internet activities starts with mobile. That's not to say that people aren't using their PCs as well, but 96% of users today are accessing the internet from a mobile device. When you look at the share of traffic, it's a little bit different. If you want to dig into those numbers, I've got a lot of insights into how things vary in terms of web traffic, but individual users, mobile is dominating. These are the top app categories in terms of downloaded apps to smartphones across both Android and iOS. For those of you who care, Android is about 96% of the market in India. So sorry, Steve Jobs and crew, but you've got a little bit of work to do in this part of the world. But if you look at the spectrum of different things that people are doing on their phones, it's quite broad already. So sure enough, it's not necessarily the case that the internet is pervasive here. But when you look at things like we're managing our finances, we're looking for recipes sometimes, we're managing fashions. Apparently there's a big wedding happening today. Yeah. So an awful lot of folks on Instagram talking about all the outfits. Apparently this is like the whole new Vogue, Screw Vogue. We've got Instagram and all the weddings. Travel, a very big growing part. So if you look at the growth of app downloads in India this year, this is probably the fastest growing, and possibly related to all of those sari uploads on Instagram, a huge number of apps that allow you to tweak your photos as well, just to make sure they're spot on. So some broad-based stuff in there. A couple of things that are not featured in this list that would be featured elsewhere, which is an interesting cultural set of insights. Elsewhere in the world, dating apps are a very big part, but they don't feature in the top downloads in India. I remember when I first started coming here, far longer ago than I would wish to admit to, Shadi.com was the big thing that had just arrived, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Sadly, that doesn't seem to have translated quite into the mobile world yet, unless there's something I'm missing. But there you go, it's a useful perspective. When you look at the time spent, roughly a third of that is on social media, and that... Okay. This is clearly a day for technology stuff. I'm going to blame Keshav for all my jinxed stuff today. Roughly a third of our time is spent on social networks. When you add on things like WhatsApp on top of that, it's even more. We're well above half of the amount of time that we spend online is to do with social and communication. This is the interesting contrast. So you remember the slide when I showed you internet and you guys were way over here? Yeah, time spent on social media. I can see half of you taking some of that time right now. You're a very sociable culture. I appreciate that every time I come here. There's no shortage of offers to go out for food, to talk about stuff, to tell me about those big, important celebrity weddings. So as part of your culture, you're just a very sharing kind of country, and that is reflected in your activities. From a business perspective, this is really important. We love to talk about the things that we love to talk about the things we hate, and we talk a lot about products and services that change our lives as well. So not all of this is just talking about the weddings, it's all sorts of commercial stuff in there as well. In terms of the platforms, so give me a wave if you're in the marketing team in some way or other. Okay. Not a huge number of you. The good news for everybody else, I've got a crash course in marketing on one slide later, so you'll save yourselves 3 years of the pain that marketing folks went through. Facebook still dominates. I see this everywhere I go. Everybody's scrolling at speed through. I don't know how you guys digest information that fast, but seriously, the speed you go through your feeds. Close to 300 million. By the time we get to the 2019 reports in January, this will already be well past 300 million. The speed it's growing at is incredible. Instagram growing even faster. It's for you. Twitter, not as big in this part of the world, and I think that's partly because of the way you guys socialize with each other. If you look at the way that things like WhatsApp private groups have grown, it tells you a lot more about how conversations work in social. So Twitter probably, from a cultural perspective, less appropriate for an Indian context. But interestingly, Snapchat, quite big. Ooh. Snapchat, quite big and growing. So you'll hear a lot of stories in the Western media that Snapchat's dying and people are leaving it. Not the case here. It's still growing. It's still growing in the Middle East as well. So a lot of interesting stuff happening behind the scenes. Do not try, I'm going to sound like Donald Trump here. Don't trust the American media. But there's a lot of fake news going on in the advertising media about the big, important platforms. This is going to sound like a terrible plug, but if you want to know what's happening in social media in India, make sure you download the reports in January. This is registered users. This is not active users, so they're not directly comparable, but I think it's really important to note that LinkedIn is massive in India in terms of both number of users and also time spent. So it's a very important market for them. A lot of that use is from very young, I say very young, we're talking like 18 to 24-year-olds, so maybe not very young, but the younger age groups are particularly active. You'll see a lot of students that are on there building their profiles, very much trying to build reputation as well. from a B2B perspective, huge numbers of opportunities. A lot of small business people there trying to build a reputation, but also looking for answers. So if you're selling things to small businesses, LinkedIn is a very good opportunity for that kind of stuff as well. Just looking at some of the specific to your younger audiences, which dominate across the whole of India, regardless of whether we're talking online or offline. But more than half of Indians aged 15 to 34 already use social media, but there's a catch to that. It's a very significant imbalance in the gender split, especially when you look at the social media numbers, which are the easiest ones to get accurate data, up-to-date stuff on. 77% of men, so 3/4 of the male population aged 15 to 34, including rural populations, already using social media today. So pretty much most millennial men in India today use social media, but barely 1/4 of the female population does. So a massive disparity there. I'm not going to get into the causes of that or the political conversation around it. Just be aware that that gap is quite important, and it's going to block growth of certain activities and certain product categories as well. So possibly something we might want to think about how we could influence as a group as well. Last set of stats before I get into my frameworks and recommendations for you, because you might be interested in e-commerce being Flipkart. It might be a thing for you guys. This is some data from Global Web Index. I am acutely aware that every data provider has slightly different numbers. So if these don't match the numbers that you know, then take all of the different sources that you can, put them all together and choose the one that you like the best. It's the easiest way to do data. But nonetheless, I think this is fascinating. 97% of internet users, regardless of age and regardless of location, have visited an online store in the last month. Now, this is claimed usage rather than absolute, so there may be some reporting that's not accurate. And interestingly, 3/4 of Indian internet users claim to have bought something, so completed the checkout process in the last month as well. That's hugely encouraging. That's quite considerably higher than a lot of other much more developed internet markets. So plenty to be excited about there. This is one of those slightly annoying, nerdy chart titles. We've taken the average revenue per user, and we've then compared it to GDP per capita. For the super economists in the room, this is GDP PPP. If you don't know what that means, it doesn't matter. You'll notice that India, again, is already moving up the chart. So close to 2% of disposable income is already being spent on internet purchases. Now, that's not a huge amount, but if you look at China being the biggest in the world, and that's only 5.5%, it's not a dramatic difference in absolute terms. So plenty of potential there. Clearly, once Indians get onto the internet, they show a real enthusiasm for e-commerce and for buying things amongst all the other stuff that they're doing as well. So you're in a good place. You might have known that already, but I'm here to reassure you on a Wednesday afternoon you've made a good choice. And there's plenty of strong growth in there as well. So users this year up double digits, but revenues up even faster. So what we notice is as people get more comfortable, as they spend more time, they spend more money. I'm hoping your data supports this as well. But to reassure you, this is consistent across the whole category in India as well. This is a little bit more provocative, though. So these are your big categories for spend. This is from Statista. The reason I use this data is it's comparable across every country that I track. And they're saying that the biggest category in e-commerce in India today is fashion, which I was a little bit surprised about, because from other data sets, it looks like consumer electronics is a lot bigger. Your own data sets will tell you exactly. If anybody cares to share that with me, I'll be very grateful. We can have a nice chat about where your audience is and where your consumers are spending their money. But when you look at things like groceries and stuff like that, those are growing dramatically as well. So we've got, like I said, different perspectives on the consumer electronics piece. So this is the India Brand Equity Forum, I think it is, IBEF. Let's just call them IBEF. They do a lot of good studies into e-commerce stuff. They reckon half the categories consumer electronics. Statista reckons it's 1/4. But don't get too hung up on absolute numbers. It's always growth. So change is much more indicative than an absolute number. And you'll notice that these are the things that are quite exciting. Like I said, groceries and beauty and care like that growing 30% year on year, and I'm expecting those numbers to be even more impressive when we get the next round of data in January as well. So lots of good stuff in there, but even very sort of evolved categories like consumer electronics, still very good growth year on year. So lots of stuff to be excited about as you go into 2019, lots of opportunities lots of things to hopefully accelerate your careers as individuals as well. How do you do that? How can you take advantage of all of these opportunities? The good news is I've got a series of tips for you. As promised, the folks that didn't study marketing, here you go. Here is your entire marketing diploma in one slide. This is all you need to know about marketing. Marketing is the balance between what you as a business want to achieve, what your audiences and consumers want to achieve. When you find the bit in between those that matches both sides, you've succeeded. So the marketing hero, Philip Kotler, for those of you who spent years looking at those 700 pages, this is what he looks like. When you see him on the street, decide what to do appropriately. But his entire 700-page book boiled down into one sentence. Marketing is the profitable satisfaction of people's wants, needs, and desires. This is the business that you are in. You're not selling things online. That's kind of how you deliver this promise. But your whole reason for existing as a business is to help your audiences find the things that they want, need, and desire, and deliver them to them at a profit. Nice and straightforward stuff. This is a framework that's going to help you do that. Like I said, this applies to dating as much as it does to selling consumer electronics and groceries and whatever else. You can test it out. If it doesn't work, let me know. But nonetheless, I'm going to take you through this at a rapid pace, but it's pretty straightforward. If you've ever studied any kind of strategy, you'll know this is not rocket science. These are fairly straightforward questions. And you're going to start with what you want. Always know what you want first. That's not where you spend all of your time, but knowing that, make sure you're not wasting your time to start off with. What are your objectives? Now, you can look at this as a business, you can look at this as a team, you can look at this as an individual. Take your pick, whichever one is most relevant to your particular activity. What are you trying to achieve? And try and look at this from an outcome perspective. So try not to get too hung up on individual KPIs. Look at what does real success look like. So I'm going to use the PC category as an example. Like I said, this is just for illustration. But if you are looking at this, if you are managing sales of PCs at Flipkart today, what you want to be looking at is how do you increase the value that you derive? Not just how do you increase sales, because you can cheat, you can sell them at half price and sell a lot more, but not increase the value. So increasing the value is the outcome that you're really looking for. There's two ways that you can grow any industry, any category, any business. You can either increase your share, so stealing money from your competitors, not literally, but you know what I mean. Or you can grow the overall size of the category itself in that concept that raising all boats, okay? So those are your two options. But Michael Porter, one of the legends of strategy, rightly pointed out, strategy is the art of sacrifice. That is a choice that you're going to need to make. Do you want to increase share or do you want to grow the category? Because they're quite different things. You could try and do both of them. But in reality, if you ask any man in the room, they will support this because we are hopeless as the male gender at multitasking. Right? In reality, marketing works a little bit like the male brain. We cannot multitask. Choose one thing and do it well. Ladies in the room, you're probably much better off to try and do both. This is how you might do it, two separate approaches to doing this. You can either you can focus on the purchase moment. I'm guessing this is a large part of where your activities are today. You wait until somebody is ready in the market to buy. They've kind of almost even chosen, or they've got down to a short list, and then they're looking for the cheapest or the quickest delivery or whatever else. The alternative to that, and the way that you go about growing the broader category, is to help influence the broader purchase journey. Now, one of the biggest barriers to selling more things is that people either don't understand the benefits to buying something, or there are too many barriers that stand in the way. And the only real way that you're going to address that is by going further back down the purchase journey, so that you can influence them to get to that final purchase moment in the first place. Now, it's important to stress that both of these are absolutely legitimate. You do not need to see one of them as being superior. Strategic choice based on where you are as a business and as a team, okay? But you've got to make that choice. But here's the interesting thing. From my PC category example, and remember this is specific just to PCs, check with your own industry and see what it looks like. But at the moment, just 43% of urban households, so this doesn't even include rural households, just 43% of those households in India currently own a PC. In a situation where you've got less than 50% penetration, simple logic and maths suggests that the bigger opportunity is trying to bring new people into the category, because fewer than half of them have already bought. Therefore, the biggest opportunity is not trying to convert a smaller number of people to repeat purchase, it's getting first-time buyers into the category. So in this particular example, I'm going to focus on how do you bring those first-time buyers in, because that's the biggest opportunity. That doesn't mean you ignore the other ones, but you need to be aware of that. So how would you do that? From a retail brand perspective, especially an e-commerce retail brand perspective, how might you go about doing that and growing the pie? So it's a bit evil for me to talk about food at this time of day, but I'm going to tease you anyway. 3 ways that you can deliver growth. Very, very straightforward model here. How many people are buying, how often they buy, and how much they spend every time they buy. If you've ever studied Unilever's approach to marketing, penetration, frequency, consumption. Those are your 3 options. They're all slightly different. So you, again, need to focus, make your choice on which one you really think is going to deliver the greatest value. In reality, so how much works a little bit like when you go to McDonald's and they try and upsize you. That's kind of where that one sits. Until you've got relatively sophisticated industry category success, you probably want to park that one until later. It's a great option, but especially when you're trying to get people into categories for first time, that can confuse the conversation. Don't upsell me yet, get me in, get me comfortable, and then upsell me later. So for this particular situation, where we're aware of the fact that the sort of industry is not overly developed, we're still less than 50% penetration, first-time buyers and repeat buyers are both useful options. As I mentioned earlier, first-time buyers are going to account for the vast majority of PCs sold in India this year. But it's important to note that the broader category, PC sales have actually been going down in India over the last few years, which is a little bit sort of surprising if you think about it. It's not like you've reached saturation. So why might that be the case? Remember I was talking about understanding the journey. What are the barriers that might stand in people's way? One of the main reasons that that's happening is people are putting off buying. It's not that they don't want a PC, but they've realized that they don't need to buy one right now, given their current understanding. This is a perception thing, not a fact thing. Okay, so they're putting it off until later, or in some cases completely. And I think similar to that, we've got a situation where existing PC owners are also postponing. They're waiting longer to either refresh or upgrade the machines. So a similar kind of challenge there. But what's interesting, when you look at the repeat purchase, so I already own a PC, how long does it take me to buy a new one? In laptops, it's an average of 3 to 4 years of cycle. So if you're in a similar sort of consumer electronics good category like, say, washing machines or other items like that, look at the cycle. How often do people buy these things and what motivates that? Once you get into the desktop side of the world, it's even more than that. So it's even more than 5. It's probably closer to 6.5 years of cycle. In India, those are India-specific numbers. They're actually even rosier than the truth, because a lot of PC owners in India today are relatively recent buyers. So they've only had a PC for 2 years. So you've no idea how long it will take for them to refresh. When you look at the global picture, some really interesting numbers. So Intel's been doing some research around the world of how quickly people refresh their machines. PC specific, but if you're in groceries, this is going to be every week. If you're in washing machines, it's every similar 7 years, right? So 7-year refresh between purchases. Once people are ready to buy a new machine, it takes them 13 weeks to decide which model they're going to buy. And in that time, 1 in 7 of them completely drops out the category, whether because they no longer perceive a benefit or because they become confused, whatever it may be. I warned you I was a nerd, so I'm going to dig into those numbers a bit more. 7 years, 7 times 52, 364 weeks. So for 13 weeks out of 364 weeks, we're thinking about buying a new machine. The maths of that is scary. If we equate that as the number of people, which is a fairly straightforward comparison, that means that just 3.6% of PC buyers are thinking about buying a PC today. 96% are not interested in buying one today. Now, that's a real challenge. At any given time, only 1 in 28 of your audience is thinking about or is ready to buy. That's simply quite challenging if you're trying to grow the category, because you need to accelerate that. If you can reduce that cycle down, And instead of once every 7 years, it's once every 4 years. That means that a significant number more people buy every year. Therefore, the category grows, your pie is bigger, job done. So if you distill a lot of this stuff down, your task as a marketer, or your task even just as any kind of business, is often just to get people to buy sooner. And that seems like an incredibly simple task, buy sooner, but there's a lot of barriers to being able to achieve that as a marketer. So just to reiterate that, we've now got our task. How do we get people to buy sooner? Now, I appreciate that's a very long setup for what seems like a pretty straightforward thing of what are we trying to achieve. But when you get it down to this level of specificity, when you know exactly what your task as a marketer or as a business is, it's an awful lot easier to succeed. It's like in a sport. If you don't know how to score runs in cricket, you ain't going to win the game. You've got to know what success looks like and how to get there if you're going to succeed. But how do we do that? So now that we know that that's our goal, how do we score more goals effectively? The rest of the framework focuses on this side. And unfortunately, as marketers, we tend to be quite selfish. We don't look at that side as much as we should do. I confess. I've been guilty of the same thing as well. The first thing you want to do is understand your audiences. And the good news is that data, especially the kind of data that you guys have with such rich data sets covering so many different categories, you've got real opportunities to understand what these people look like. In marketing terms, we often like to break these people down into demographic groups, whether it's saying they're students or it's men and women aged 13 to 25 in tier 1 and tier 2 cities. The funny thing about that, much as this is quite handy, we like to sort of put people into boxes, the reality of that is that the people in those groups are not the same. So I'm looking out at all of you. Pretty much everybody in this room falls into the 18 to 34 male and female category in some way or other. But as individuals, you're all dramatically different to each other. You've got different dreams, you've got different objectives, and you've got different products that you care about. So trying to lump people together based on things like that is not necessarily going to help you achieve success. What you want to do instead is understand a bit more of that journey. So what are they trying to achieve and what's making it difficult for them to get there? Or, critically, how do you get them there sooner? In the PC category as an example, again, people who've never used a PC, so this might be students that are about to go off to university that for whatever reason have never really used a computer, they've definitely never bought one before. Their journey, their purchase cycle is going to be very different to somebody who's like an SMB owner who's buying machines every month because they're growing their team rapidly. If you think about the guys when they started Flipkart, how many machines have they had to buy now? It's like we've kind of got a team dedicated to buying machines for all of you. But early days, when I started my first businesses and I was buying a PC every 2 weeks, you get to the stage where you kind of know what you're looking for. It's very, very different and different kinds of journeys, okay? The purchase journey. For the non-marketers in the room, again, I'm going to save you 5 years of pain and studying. This is what the purchase journey looks like from a very basic concept. So this is the model. I'm aware of things, I consider them, I may go on to act. If I act, then I'll evaluate whether I've achieved what I wanted, and if I really appreciate that, then I may go back and do it again. That's the very sort of core concept of how the journey is described. But the reality, and you know this yourselves, the last time that you bought, say, a smartphone, how much of it was it dead straightforward versus how many times did you think, oh, actually, I quite like that new model, and the process starts again. This is the reality. It's not a linear thing. It's much more like a game of snake and ladders, right? You start here, you're trying to get to the finish, and you get to here, you go all the way back again. Damn it, Samsung's just released a new machine. That's confused me. I've got to go back and reevaluate what matters to me. This is what marketing deals with. Marketing's whole existence is about understanding the snakes and ladders along our audiences and our consumers' journey. So you want to understand what are the barriers that slow down progress or put a complete stop to progress, and what are the things that we can do or the opportunities that we can take advantage of that will accelerate our progress towards success. Pretty straightforward stuff, but this is an awful lot easier to grapple with than awareness, consideration, all that stuff. Snakes and ladders, nice and easy. Use it in your next planning meeting and see if it helps. I'm Scottish, we tend to be quite pessimistic, it's why we invented whiskey. So the barriers to success are what I'm going to focus on. The ladders are very specific to each business, so I'm not going to talk about those in depth, but these are some of the barriers that you need to be considering. My biggest advice to you, if you're going to spend any money in understanding people and understanding what your objectives are. Invest in understanding the snakes and ladders specific to your audience in your category. What is it that's making it difficult for you to achieve success with your specific audience for your given category? Because that's the surest way of understanding the barriers that you need to overcome. We had a quick look at this across lots of different research for the PC category. So Intel, fantastic amounts of research into this. The number one barrier for PC buyers in India is complexity. I'm going to dig into that in a little bit of detail now, so let me just park it. Price, no surprises here, PCs are not cheap, and therefore in a market like India, you've got challenges there. But things like this is quite interesting. The number of things that I can now do on my smartphone that I used to have to buy a PC for, every day that increases. The amount of clever stuff I can do on my phone is quite incredible. Can't quite write a presentation on it comfortably yet, but we're getting there. Soon my world may be a little bit messy. Brand challenges. How does trust work in rural India for your brand? Do people believe that you are a safe option? Do they believe that the items will be delivered on time and match what their expectations were? And then, I'm not even going to pretend to understand as much about the logistics challenges in e-commerce because you guys are the experts in this, but even something as simple as an address in rural India, is it specific enough for me to be able to deliver the stuff? All of these are challenges that you'll face. And these are some of the snakes and ladders that you need to understand how you can overcome. Marketing can help you address pretty much every single one of them, depending on how creatively you think. So let me take that first example, because complexity is a result of not enough accurate, relevant information. Complexity is just a lack of adding things together and joining the dots. Some brand new research that Intel has conducted that hasn't actually been published yet, so you're amongst the first people to have seen this, which is great. More than half of all PC shoppers, regardless of how experienced they are in the category, report that they feel overwhelmed when it comes to choosing a new PC. That's a very worrying place to be as a category. Because if people are overwhelmed, there's a much greater chance that they just don't make a choice, or they make the wrong choice and then they're dissatisfied and they never come back. So we need to address this. Obviously, this is a massive problem. This is a big snake. Unfortunately, as an industry, historically, we have been perpetuating the problem. This is just a small random selection of adverts from PC manufacturers. I'm not judging them here. I'm not making sort of derogatory statements, but unfortunately, these adverts are not helping. They're not making it easier for me to make a choice. They all seem to do the same thing. They have a picture of the laptop, they have a clever phrase somewhere, a learn more button, and then usually some kind of specs statement, which I don't understand because I've never bought a PC before. And they all look the same. Marketing's all about differentiation, right? So you're all sitting there feeling quite smug now, saying, oh, they're terrible, aren't they? I'm going to unfortunately make you feel uncomfortable now. This is a selection of brand pages for PC purchases across a variety of different e-commerce platforms in India. Yeah. Can you spot yours? The only way you can spot yours is because the color is different. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same. Not a lot of differentiation going on here. And worryingly, you obviously can't read this because even up close I'm finding it difficult, but these description lines here, lots of letters, numbers, things I do not understand. They make no sense to me whatsoever. I've been buying PCs for a very long time, and even I don't know whether I should be buying 8 gig of RAM with a faster processor, or if I need 16 gig of RAM and a slightly slower processor. And no matter how many times I research it, I get a slightly different answer. So chances are your first-time buyer is going to be like, what? I don't even know what these things are. This is not how to encourage people to feel less overwhelmed. It's obviously working for you. You're selling things, but could you be selling a lot more? That's the big opportunity, right? Harvard Business Review, I'll defer to them. They know an awful lot more about this kind of stuff than I do. And then saying, you need to get away from technical specifications and talk about the real life value, whether it's PCs, whether it's washing machines, whether it's cars, you name it. What's the real life value of the product that you sell? Where does it fit in somebody's life and how does it make their life better? Dead straightforward stuff. Oops, it's that. Don't talk about the specifications. They're interesting, but talk to people about motivations first. So I do a lot of work with automotive brands, and what we've discovered in the research that we've been doing is people make an emotional choice. They fall in love with the car that they want to buy, and then they use specifications to justify it later. Your task in marketing is to get the emotional sale first, get people to desire it, and then give them all of the logical ammunition they need to say, oh yes, I made the absolutely right choice. It's got X, Y, and Z numbers and letters in it, so it must be good. Works in cars, works in PCs, works in all sorts of, even in food, we do it with ingredients. We go, I really want to buy this. Oh, look at that, it's healthy. Justified. Help people understand, how do they achieve the things that they care about? Not, this is what I make. Nobody cares about what you make, ultimately, or what you sell. What people care about is what you can do for them. What you make happen in their life is what they're paying money for. So how do you do that? How do you change marketing to make things easier? Now, this is going to be consistent across any kind of consumer electronics category that has any kind of confusion, which, if we're honest with ourselves, is most of them. How do you simplify the story, and how do you simplify the number of options they need to choose from? You need to give people some choice so that they feel they've made an important decision, but at the same time, giving them too many makes them overwhelmed. How do you educate people about the things that matter? Now, this doesn't mean how do you educate them about the importance of the RAM that goes into their machine. That isn't really what we're talking about. This is more, how do you achieve the things you care about? If you're speaking to students, it may be something as simple as, how do you use Microsoft Office to create compelling content that will wow your teacher? How do you write a great CV that will help you get your first job? That's what people buy PCs for. They're not buying them for the tech specs. They're buying them to make their life better. When you go into a real world store, one of the first things that you'll do is avoid the salesperson. You'll be like, no, I'm not ready. I'm terrified. But after about 10, 15 minutes, you have questions and you want to talk to somebody. Even if you know what you want, the chances are you'll speak to somebody to make sure you're not making a bad choice. Some of it is information, some of it's reassurance. And then the last thing, inspiration. This is the bit that far too many marketers, and especially the e-commerce category, I think misses out on. If we can inspire people so that they understand what they can achieve when they actually get things right, this is where the magic comes in. Personal story. Last time I bought a PC. I make music in my spare time. You won't like it. It's horrible techno. I apologize in advance if you check it out. But I'm sitting there on a Saturday morning watching a video of one of my favorite musicians making some music, and he shows me this little trick on a piece of software. Less than half an hour later, I've bought the software, I've bought a new series of toys to help me make that, but I've also bought a new PC because I realized that the machine I was using isn't going to be fast enough to do that kind of stuff properly. In the space of half an hour, based on genuinely one video of one guy doing one cool trick, I spent thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, if you told me that there was a new machine out there with a new hard disk in it, I would have been like, wow, that's really interesting. But when you show me to do the stuff that I care about, I'm like, wow, genuinely, my wallet came out without me even noticing, without my wife noticing either. Something as simple as this, though, okay? This is one of the big challenges that you guys face in India, is you've got all these different languages. It's something I've been learning about on a personal level this week. Every region that I go to is slightly different. Giving people the chance to ask those questions to, say, a chatbot, or even just into the search bar in a local language via voice is going to cut down all the complexity. If I don't know how to spell one of these bloody names, can I just say it into the search bar and in my comfortable language? That's going to make life so much less complex for these audiences. Very straightforward stuff from a technological perspective, but the benefit of it is incredible. But how do you bring all of these activities to life? So this is sort of, so far it's talked a little bit about the strategic approach to the messaging, but how do you bring that messaging stuff to life? I'm sure this is a word that a lot of you have heard a lot of over the last couple of years. Omni-Channel is the future of retail and of marketing. It's absolutely true. The best thing about Omni-Channel is that it stops putting things into silos. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is we have a digital marketing team, a broadcast marketing team, and then we've got all these other things like PR and sales. And the consumer doesn't care. One of our biggest mistakes as a business is that we split up our activities based on how our budgets are divided instead of looking at the ways that our audiences are united in the activities that they do. So this is what Omni-Channel looks like. How do I get everything that my business does to tell a consistent and compelling story to my audiences wherever they may come across my brand? Really, really simple logic. It's very difficult to argue with this as a concept, except there's one slight problem. It's a little bit back to front. So the whole concept of building everything around your audience is great, but that's not really what we've been doing. Far, far too much omni-channel activity starts with the channel. We'll start with our website. We'll start with Facebook as a marketing tool. What we're not doing is thinking about the customer and saying, where and when in my customer's life do these benefits and these activities have greatest relevance? Don't interrupt me when I'm looking for recipes to talk to me about something unrelated to recipes. Be very clear about where the benefit and the value lies. And that is just a case of flipping the direction of these arrows. So you start with the consumer and you identify the times and places and channels. It's as simple as that. Always, always start with what the audience wants, needs, desires, and find a way to deliver it to them where it has greatest impact. So I've been looking for a retail example of this. I only just saw this yesterday, so I don't know it in depth, but this is a retail example, frustratingly out of North America. I know marketers always use foreign examples and it's annoying, but this is genuinely brilliant. So REI is both online and offline retailer. In the US, they sell outdoor goods, so camping, hiking shoes, all that kind of stuff. If you go to their website, the whole thing is now oriented around getting you outside. They're organizing hiking activities, they're organizing group camping trips, they're organizing training sessions so you can learn how to gut a fish if you want to go fishing. It's quite scary. But if you think about it, this makes so much more sense than trying to sell me a pair of hiking boots or a tent, because they're showing me how I achieve the stuff that I care about. How do I become more of an outdoors person? This is their website. You know that at the bottom of that thing where I've gone along to the store and I've gone on a training thing about camping, that I'm going to buy camping stuff. They know that. Once I'm bought into the category, once I care, that's when my wallet comes out. Same as that music example I talked about earlier. This kind of stuff is fascinating. Now, I don't know whether this is appropriate for you guys yet. You probably don't want to go as exaggerated as this and replace your entire website with a whole series of this is how you do X, Y, and Z. But nonetheless, having some of these things on your website, especially when it comes to complex categories like the PC category or whatever else, huge amounts of value. What do you want to use your PC for? How much do you want to spend? How much do you know about PC? Simple questions like this are going to make me feel welcome as a consumer and probably therefore be a lot more comfortable digging deeper and making decisions. So 3 questions you want to be asking yourself next time you're planning an activity, whether it's a marketing campaign, whether it's a landing page on your website, whatever it may be. Where and when in your audience's life can you deliver that value and deliver the greatest impact? When does the decision-making process of buying a new PC have greatest relevance in my life? Is it in my lunch hour or is it not? That kind of question. Which channels are going to allow you to reach people in those times and places? Now, the good news is the devices that we have with us all the time, that sleep next to us, that cause trouble with our best friends because we stop paying attention to each other and pay more attention to our screens, these are with us all the time. So there's a very good chance that this is a very good way of delivering information to your audience at any given time. But it's what you do with it that's important. It's not just let's get some banner ads on mobile and that'll do the job. Your third question is how can you use those channels to deliver real value? So like I said earlier, don't sell me the software. Show me what I can do with the software, and I will then be absolutely sold and buy it. That's your magic. Don't sell them the sausage, sell them the sizzle. It's a terrible cliche, but it's true. It's what people are looking for, is what's relevant to them, not what you make. I promised you that I would talk a little bit about price as well. So if you've looked at marketing previously, you'll know that there are lots of different things that we can play with across the mix. I'm just going to give you some context before I get into that. The average price of a new PC in India is more than 80% of household income across the full country. That's kind of scary. That makes it seem like this is out of reach for most people. But like I said, price is something that you can play with. It's not a given. Even when that price seems incredibly high, there are a few things that you can do to get around that. The most obvious, work with manufacturers to create lower cost machines. I know that you guys have got some great stuff going on with your white label products. I was admiring them out in the reception area. This kind of stuff is exactly the sort of place where you can play if you see an opportunity there. EMI seems like a very straightforward thing. EMI is not a finance thing, it's a marketing thing. Get your heads out of the idea that this is about finance, because it's about how do I help people achieve the things that they care about. That's what they're looking for. But this is the one that I get really interested in. So products, if you think about the idea of all of these software as a service, where you're paying monthly installments and you get the latest version as soon as it's ready, why not do the same thing with PCs? A rental service, for want of a better word, that upgrades my machine every 2 years. And I pay for that because I know that I'm not going to have to make a decision at the end of it. I'm going to get great advice. And after 2 years, I'm going to have the best machine. Remember, the objective we talked about was getting people to buy sooner? One of the easiest ways to do it is just to make it easy as possible for people to do that whenever they feel that time is right. We do this with our mobile phone contracts. I know that in India, most of you are sort of buying credits and then using it up. But in a lot of other countries, especially in the Western world, you'll have a contract. You pay a fixed amount of money every month for 2 years, and then at the end of that, you get a new phone. So this is totally standard in this sort of similar categories. It's just a case of adapting those models to the PC category as well. Very straightforward stuff. Even place. So you guys are an e-commerce brand, but that doesn't mean that physical stores are not something you can consider, because they're not just about retail distribution. Let me give you some context before I give you the example. This is some global research, so it's not specific just to India, but on average, when people are looking for a consumer electronics product, they consult an average of 14 different sources, and 2/3 of people like a combination of online and offline stuff. Now, for you guys, I'm aware that you probably know a lot of people are going to go into a physical store, touch and feel things, and then go, yay, I'll get it cheaper on Flipkart. So the fact that you don't have physical stores is not a disaster. But take this as an example. This is a physical store, but this was never intended in Apple's world to be a distribution arm. This is 100% marketing. You can buy the device there if you really want to carry it home. But this is much more about the Church of Apple. You can go in and pay your homage to Steve Jobs and do your thing, right? And just the whole design of it is there for you to go in and indulge yourself. Now, you can do this with pretty much anything. I just recently bought a washing machine, and creepily we went in and we were like, oh, must touch to feel that it's a real thing. We do these very strange things as consumers, and it's not always obvious when you try and rationalize it, but people want to touch things that they spend a lot of money on, or even just vegetables, squeezing just to make sure it's real. From many of so that was one of the 14 sources. You've got 13 other ones. For many of the other ones, content and social is one of the things we always want to dig into. I'm going to give you a very brief run through what's happening in the world of social and content marketing, because I know that if I don't, it'll be part of Q&A. So I'm just going to jump and give you the answers before the questions. Let's dig into content and social very quickly. If you want to achieve success in social media marketing today, you're going to need to think about paid media. It sounds very convenient that a marketing person is telling you that. I personally get no benefit. I sell no media. This is the reason why I'm telling you that this is important. If you have a Facebook page with 100 fans, only 7 of them will see any given post that you publish unless you buy media to promote it. 93% of your fans will never see your content if you don't push it. Now, that's kind of terrifying. You spent all that time and energy building a Facebook fan base, and yet most of them don't see it. 93% of them don't see it. So if you want to achieve that reach that Facebook promises, you're going to have to pay Facebook for the benefit. Still one of the most efficient ways of reaching people. You just need to be conscious of the fact that you need to spend that money. Organic word of mouth is still the best way to get the biggest reach, though. No matter how many fans you have on your page, if you can get those WhatsApp groups to talk favorably about your service, your reach will be way, way higher. Because 20,000 people with 100 friends talking favorably is way better than one page with 1 million fans on it. So that's your big opportunity. Reviews, a big part of your business already? It should be even bigger. Reviews are absolutely essential to brand. They're not just a sales trick. They're about proving that you are trustworthy and authentic as a business. How do you drive more reviews? Because this is the real trick. The more reviews you have, the more comfortable people feel. Dead straightforward. Wait a couple of days after somebody's bought something and then ask them. The reason for waiting a couple of days? If I'm angry and disappointed, I'll usually tell you within 2 to 3 days. If you wait more than 3 days, chances are you've got at least a neutral, if not a positive thing. But asking people, please will you write something? If that's not enough, give them a little bit of a nod, show that you're listening and that you're thankful for these things. And if you absolutely must, give them a benefit, 10% off, a little bag, whatever it may be, something clever. Just don't bribe them, firstly because it's illegal, but second of all, because it will actually do more damage than good. If you're seen to be buying reviews, you will do the opposite of creating trust. Oops. Influencers, big part of your business or not? Influencers is a really interesting one. They're a great opportunity, but you need to use them strategically. It's very easy to get misguided. Set objectives and then think, who is the best person to deliver that outcome? The temptation is to always go over here. We always want to use the big famous people. But really, is your average Bollywood star going to be credible when they're talking about a PC? It's not really their area of expertise. Experts are great at that, but they tend to have a very good idea of themselves. They charge a lot of money to be an influencer on your behalf. It's not a bad thing, but you can't do a lot of that if they're expensive. Not that they're any cheaper than these guys, obviously. But these ones, the ones that just love you because they love what you do. If you go onto the internet and you look at anything to do with Apple, there are hundreds of thousands of people that tell you how much they love Apple. Why? Why do we spend our time doing this? Starbucks, the same thing. The number of people that upload pictures of Starbucks to Instagram. Why? But we do, we care, we love these brands. Getting these people to tell your story is a huge opportunity, but understanding what that story is, do a little bit of listening in social media. When people talk about your brand or the brands that you want to sell more of, what are the things that they're saying? What's the value to them when they talk about it? That's what you're looking for. And then the last thing, make sure you measure the revenue value of all of this stuff. I'm guessing you guys are very good at measuring the impact of all the activities that you have, but nonetheless, make sure that you're identifying not the communication success. Reach and engagement are not indicators of value. They're just measurements of noise. What you really want to be doing is understanding progress towards success, okay? So whether it is on every single social media post you put out, understanding how quickly that takes you through to value and sales. If you're struggling to do that, and admittedly that can be quite tricky, a very simple survey. Have you seen any of our marketing activities? Facebook post, banner ad, poster. Give people a chance to say what they have or have not seen. Measure the impact that that's had. Do you now feel more comfortable buying a PC, yes or no? Are you less overwhelmed, yes or no? And then identify how much they're likely to spend or have just spent. Those 3 things are all you need to measure to identify genuine ROI. You can do that as a web survey, and you can promote it with Facebook ads at next to nothing and get a very representative sample. The last thing you need to do is act on the insights. What you've learned, dead straightforward. If it didn't work, don't do it again. Don't be that egotistical marketer that insists that it works even though the data says it doesn't. Change it. What gaps do you still face and what do you need to do to plug them? But most importantly, this one, where you can see that you get more than $1 back for every dollar you invest, please promote it. It may not be the sexiest idea, but if it works, it makes you money, it will accelerate your career, which is really a lot more sexy than a great campaign. There you are, that's your framework. So I'm guessing, given that was quite a fast run through the framework, you're going to have a few questions. Just before I get to the questions, though, I did promise you a Christmas gift before I left for the data lovers in the room to test whether or not you're comfortable with QR codes. If you don't like QR codes, it's datareportal.com, but you will get free 7,500 charts of data for every country, including India, at datareportal.com. And if you're the shy type that doesn't want to ask questions as part of a public Q&A, just let this gentleman take his picture. You can find me on LinkedIn here. Another QR code, just in case you missed the first one, you can get another one here. But with that, thank you very much. It's been a real honor being here with you today. I really appreciate you giving up an hour of your afternoon to join me. I will now open up for questions. Give me a wave if you've got, have we got a mic for the questions as well? Yeah, cool, okay. And I would hasten to add, if you're not in the PC category and you've got a question about your own category and how this applies to it, absolutely now is the best time to be asking that question. So if you want to say, but I'm in groceries. Yeah, question down the front here.
I believe another medium of reaching out to consumer are the communities. Facebook is the biggest, but how's the impact globally? Is it worth investing in communities? Or we didn't talk about that.
That is a very good and very topical question because communities are becoming bigger and bigger. So if we look at something like Facebook groups as an example, they're going to be much, much bigger as an impact as we go into 2019. And you're absolutely right, on a global level, I think a lot of the times we like to focus our activities on India because that's our budget. Mistake. When you're looking at pretty much any category, the audience conversation is global. When I'm thinking about music, I don't go, oh, I only want to know what people in Singapore think. I'll ask people in the UK, people in the US, people in Peru. And this is a global community. So absolutely understanding what those global conversations are, how they apply to a local setting is really important. But yeah, whether you're looking at Facebook groups and communities, whether you're looking at private WhatsApp chat groups, another massive part of the culture here, understand how they work. What's the benefit to the audience member in participating in those communities? What's the benefit they're looking to take out? And then try and help them achieve that. Give them resources so that they can fuel that conversation where needed. If you've got a very influential member within that group that can help tell a story on your behalf, absolutely reach out to them and work with them as well. So ironic that you asked that question now, because just before I walked in, we were just setting up a campaign to be doing a Facebook group community activity exactly like that for one of our clients. So yes, communities, Facebook groups, big for 2019, probably even bigger than content that goes into the feed. So, first point for you. More questions?
Yeah. So you said instead of celebrities, we should be using tech experts or the advocates. But how many people will be actually going to those tech expert pages, for example, while buying a TV?
Yeah.
You know?
Good question. So I probably didn't qualify that slide properly. You can do all three of the above, but it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're looking for reach, if you want to increase the reach of your activities, celebrities are a good way of doing that, but with lower levels of credibility. My recommendation would be, this is like a diet. You need a balanced diet of different food groups. You need your proteins and your veg. Yeah. So you need to make sure that when you're looking at an influencer strategy, you know exactly what you want to achieve as the first bit. What's the outcome that I'm trying to address? And then based on your budgets, realistically, choose a mix that's going to help you get there faster. You don't have to use all of them. You don't have to use any of them if you don't want to. But I think understand before you get involved in anything, who is going to be the best help to achieve the objective. So for example, something like complexity, you probably don't want a super nerdy tech expert to help because they're not going to break things down. Whereas if you really want to reach out to a community that's about creative excellence, so for example, the Photoshop community, you probably want a Photoshop expert to be talking through that stuff. So always start with your objective, make it quite specific, then choose the mix of influencers to go with that. But be creative. And again, beware of fake news. There's a lot of people out there pimping things about influencers that are complete nonsense. Common sense, trust your instinct.
And one more question. So you said that to evaluate the effectiveness of a media channel, for example, YouTube or anything, you should put a survey question. So, for example, if I have a YouTube advertisement and while buying any tech product, it takes a 2-3 period of at least search period before making any decision. So I'm showing a video now, and if I put a questionnaire after the video, most probably person will say good about it. But if I try to put it on the product page, which is on Flipkart or any other platform, that video would have been seen 3 months before, and the question is now. So probably the results will be diluted in terms of that questionnaire.
Yeah, so I think my first point on that one is ask yourself whether you're going to get useful insights from putting a questionnaire at any point there. So asking people what they're going to do before they've done it is usually a fairly misrepresentative series of activities. If you ask me that I'm going to go home and do lots of exercise tonight, absolutely. Reality, I'm sitting down with a whiskey and watching TV. So I think what I would try and do is, and I know that there's lots of privacy concerns around cookies and stuff like that, as much as possible, have the longest term cookie. Maybe don't make it a personally identifiable thing, but understand, when did the journey begin? What was the very first thing that they saw that related to your business? and then understand how the journey progresses over time. Only once they've really bought something should you be asking a lot of survey questions, but there's one sort of twist to that, which is if they put something in their cart and then didn't check out, that's another really good time to be sending a survey maybe a couple of weeks later and saying, did you buy it somewhere else? What happened? What went wrong? Don't you love me anymore? That kind of question. So yeah, surveys, let's face it, as consumers, when we step out of our work world, we've already been sent way too many surveys, and most of the time we're just like, go away, straight into the bin. So be very careful how often you use them. Use them very strategically to identify genuinely important things that you don't understand. Try not to use them just to prove to your boss that you've done a good job, because you'll upset your customers. Question over here. That's on.
Yeah, what should we approach when we are planning on what should be the effort distribution between branding and a performance?
That's a brilliant question. That's $1 billion question right there. So lots of different ways that you could approach this. My immediate answer is, do you understand at the moment what role brand plays within choosing between you versus an Amazon versus one of your other competitors? And admittedly, this is very broad research across lots of different categories, so don't take this as absolute perfection. But from the research that I've seen for the e-commerce category, specifically in India, brand is the most important determinant. But when I say brand, I don't mean logo. Obviously, what I'm talking about here is, do I trust that you will deliver the product that was specified on the page when you promise to deliver it? That's brand. Brand is a promise and nothing more. We like to conflate it with lots of other stuff, but in the audience's world, it's a promise. Provided that I trust you enough that you're going to deliver what I asked for when I asked for it, immediately below that is price, and that comes down to your performance marketing aspect of how quickly can I bring people in. So I would suggest that provided that you have a strong brand perception, and again, that'll come back to, that's one of the survey questions that you probably need to be looking at, is give people a choice. Which of these brands do you trust most? You know your competitive set just as well as I do. So choose the brands that you want to include in there. Maybe have one offline brand in there as well, so a big physical world retailer. Which of these brands would you trust to buy a car, a washing machine, a PC, your groceries? When you've got to the stage where more than half of the audience trusts your brand, then you can probably move into the much more day-to-day activities of making sure that you've got the lowest possible price or the best possible delivery terms. Nothing is ever a pure price play. I think if I said, my favorite example of this, there is no justification for anybody in the world buying a Louis Vuitton bag on functionality. You can go and get a plastic bag and you can carry your stuff around in it for a tiny fraction, but you're not buying it because of the fact that it's a bag. You're buying all the things that go around it. So e-commerce is a bit different because ultimately you can often buy exactly the same product elsewhere for different prices, but provided your pricing is roughly the same as your competitors, brand then becomes a bigger part. Do you remember way back at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about guiding people through the full journey? That's where you can build greater goodwill, and goodwill is one of the things that, all of the things being considered, I will actively choose you over a competitor that's got a similar price. If you've helped me, if I like you, provided I don't have to make significant sacrifices to stay with you, I will actively choose you over a competitor. So that's what that bit was about. Getting people through that journey is your way of upping your goodwill over time. There's an awful lot more to this than I can quite answer on stage quickly. If you really want to dig into it, send me an email. I can send you some case studies and similar. But yeah, ultimately, this is a very difficult choice for everybody in e-commerce anywhere.